Impacting you all on This Week in Cincinnati on 9 on your side.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us on this Sunday morning on This Week in Cincinnati. I'm Craig McKee. Over the years, the city of Cincinnati has undergone a wave of transformation and development, and there's no doubt that that will carry over into the new year here in 2020. Joining me right now to discuss what this year will bring for Cincinnati and perhaps some memories of 2019, Mayor John Cranley. First off, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Greg. Good to be back.
So 2020 is already starting out with a lot of activity in City Hall. You've already made a number of announcements. If we can, an issue that carries over from 2019 and is already kind of leading its way into 2020, talking about the number of deadly shootings in Cincinnati. According to the latest data that we had, at least tied back to May 30th, there were 47 deadly shootings by that point. ShotSpotter has made another headline with the number of shots it counted even on New Year's Eve, and there's an expansion in the works. Let's split that up a little bit. First, the deadly shootings in Cincinnati. How are you tackling that issue specifically in the new year?
Well, first off, whenever there's a loss of life, it's tragic for obviously that individual and their family. And we will never be satisfied until there are 0 homicides in a year, and that'll probably never
happen. Right.
And last year was a little bit of an uptick. However, over a 10-year period, 2018 was the best year in 10 years. And 2019 was the second best year in 10 years. Now, that is not in the number of homicides, but the number of shootings
itself,
of
right.
Actual victims,
Right.
Which is way down over 10 years. But if you're the victim, that's cold comfort.
Right.
And so we're hiring more cops. We're getting more intel. ShotSpotter is the best technology. When we introduced ShotSpotter in Avondale 2 years ago, we saw a dramatic reduction in Avondale. Last year, we introduced a ShotSpotter in Price Hill mid-year, and we saw a dramatic reduction in shootings in Price Hill after it was introduced.
Right.
This year, it'll go into West End over the Rhine and parts of Westwood and parts of what used to be called English Woods and North Fairmount and East Westwood. So we believe that we're doing everything we can. We're supporting our police. We're putting more cops on the street. And with technology like that, I think we'll see, hopefully, an improvement.
We've covered ShotSpotter for many years, and you know, we do see those boundaries where the sensors are and they're picking up the shots being fired, that there are less shots being fired and they do move out of that area. But what's the ramification of that? Are you seeing anything where, okay, now you're seeing more violence in other areas and you're having to shift resources now as a result of that?
No, I mean, well, yes, certainly it does shift, but there's less of it because we make arrests along the way. And ShotSpotter helps us to get certain shooters and killers off the streets. So while there is some shifting, there's an overall reduction, and then we keep chasing it, right. And continue to make arrests and to get the shooters off the streets.
Medical marijuana, of course, major headline in 2019, going into 2020. One of the headlines carrying over the drug testing of city employees. Where does that stand when you talk about medical marijuana use, city employees, and the drug use of employees who work for the city?
I think it's a certain classification that I'm not totally familiar with who was all subject to drug testing. Certainly, if you drive a garbage truck, you know, right. And you're operating a major vehicle, or a police officer, a police cruiser, or fire truck, we obviously don't want you impaired while you're doing that driving, but I'm not totally familiar with if we do much drug testing beyond that.
Right, but that was the question about how do you drug test certain city employees who have those certain responsibilities, taking a look at can police officers beyond medical marijuana or those who work for the trash services or other city services who are driving vehicles, if there's medical marijuana involved, how the city was going to approach that drug testing for those employees.
I think those are ongoing issues that the whole country and is grappling with as medical marijuana becomes commonplace. Mm-hmm. And I think we need a humanitarian approach, but we got to also make sure that, you know, motor vehicles, et cetera, are dealt with safely. And so I'm not saying I have the perfect solution for that. I think it's a work in progress.
Gang of Five, obviously another major headline. Vice Mayor Christopher Smitherman introduced that motion saying that the 5 members should cover their legal fees. The city, an estimated right around $176,000. The city has forked out for those legal fees. Do you see a resolution to that motion and these 5 members of council reimbursing the city?
Well, I don't think there'll be a vote on the motion because we can't have a majority of the council vote on it without there being a conflict of interest. So they have admitted to wrongdoing. The city has had to pay out a fine. It's clearly a terrible thing that happened. And I know Greg Landsman, among others, has apologized. And so.
But apologies only go so far for the taxpayers who call the Feedback Friday hotline and email us saying, wait a second, we just paid $176,000 to cover these legal fees, tax dollars that could have gone to other projects, maybe even the bank's project or, things that would actually raise the city up.
Oh, it was very wasteful of tax dollars, and it was irresponsible, and candidly, it cost the city at the time with about 6 weeks of no leadership, and as came out at the time, they clearly were focused on having the power of being running the city at the expense of the Kyle Plush incident happened at that time, and we had the homeless encampments that sprung up during those 6 weeks. So it was a dysfunctional time, and it was clear that it was dysfunctional because of the illegal activity of the council members. They admitted to their guilt. The city's had to pay fines. I think there's been a significant punishment, but yes, there's no question it was very wasteful.
I know you've spoken in open council meetings about the situation. Have you pulled any of them, or did you pull all of them off in a group setting and say, this can't happen? Did you have any one-on-one conversations or group meetings with them outside of city?
Well, I didn't have group meetings with them, but I certainly have made my opinions known.
Yeah. Let's talk about this solar project. It was kind of a blip on the headlines in our newscast, and then it kind of went away. For those at home who aren't familiar here, we're talking about a location about 40 miles east of the city, 310,000 solar panels, expected to be, at least at this time, the largest solar array in the country. Why should taxpayers care about this project? I know at the beginning there's no upfront cost for the city. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a cost on the back end for this, possibly for taxpayers. What does this really mean?
Well, we're very proud of it. Mm-hmm. It is the largest city-led project.
Okay.
There are larger projects led by the private sector that are bigger.
Okay.
But for local governments, as far as we know, this is the largest in the country. And we have looked around the country, and
sure.
So as of right now, it's the largest. The reason why taxpayers should be happy about it is that it's literally going to save us money. We consume roughly about 125 megawatts of energy per year. Now, that doesn't mean anything in the abstract, but let me kind of put some meat on the bones. Mm-hmm. That involves us pumping water, Cincinnati Water Works, to 2 million people. Because Cincinnati doesn't just pump water to Cincinnati residents, but to all of Hamilton County, Northern Kentucky, Butler, Warren, and Claremont County.
Sure.
Also, we, the city, pay to do the energy to process all the sewage.
Clean it all and get
that's
it ready.
Well, on the other side.
Yeah.
And so that's less people, but it's all of Hamilton County.
Sure.
So those two functions alone are enormous amount of energy to pump the water into your home. So when you open the spigot at your home, there's the water pressure to get it there.
Sure.
That is collectively about 75 megawatts between water and sewer. So then everything else we do is another 50 megawatts. Now, energy can be purchased and bought by the hour, okay? And not surprisingly, when energy is in high demand, it's more expensive. So at 3 o'clock on a July afternoon, when you're cranking your air conditioner, it's very expensive to buy energy at that time.
Right.
At 3 in the morning, it's very cheap to buy energy. Solar is most advantageous when it's sunny and it's hot.
Right.
Okay? So by doing this, about 25% we will be essentially selling energy at the time that it's most expensive. So you're buying low and selling high. So we're selling at the highest time, and we'll still be buying traditional energy at 3 in the morning.
Right.
So the solar will take about 25% of our total energy consumption. We will still get 75% of our energy from traditional means, predominantly coal, in this region. But not only is the solar good for the environment, meaning less CO2 emissions, less global warming, but it literally will save money. We're not going to buy more than that 25% because at this time, it would be more expensive to the taxpayer to continue to buy it in non-peak hours. Someday, as solar technology gets better, it may be 40%, 50%. But right now, at this scale of a project, 25% of our energy is literally cheaper. So it's not only good for global warming and for the environment, but it's literally good for taxpayers.
And on that note, we'll be right back with more conversation with Mayor John Cranley after the break.
Headlines, the issues impacting you, all on This Week in Cincinnati on 9 on your side.
Welcome back to This Week in Cincinnati. Right now, crews are still investigating after a building partially collapsed in November at 4th and Race downtown. I'm joined again here with Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley. If we can, let's talk about the investigation and where things stand right now. We know that OSHA is involved, obviously, with an investigation like this. The city, they were going to start their own independent investigation. Where does that investigation lie right now?
Well, we're working with the feds and making all information available. I mean, it was a private project, so we're not directly involved.
Sure.
But we want to be available as they go forward. Obviously, it's a very tragic story, and I just can't imagine the heartbreak that the family's going through.
Are there any evaluations or reviews of steps that the city does take when, approving permits for projects like this? And while this is an internal project and they're handling their own inspectors and things of that nature, permits still have to be pulled and approved by the city.
Oh yeah, we have
extra steps that you're taking now?
Well, we'll have to wait for the OSHA report. We consider that. I mean, I get complaints most of the time about permits taking too long and there being too many permits.
Sure.
So we're very rigorous and aggressive on that. And if they make recommendations that we need additional layers, we'll look at that.
The bank's venue, while there has, with every project I think a city does, there's always people that have something pro or something con to say about it. With Newport creating their venue and Cincinnati now creating your venue, there's always this talk, why do we need two venues? The banks has been not necessarily a black eye, because there have been a number of successes there. There have been issues trying to keep tenants on certain restaurants and what have you, but then there's the success of GE and other buildings. Parking garages, though, that haven't been finished. It's a moving process, I guess, with this bank's project, ongoing project. When we're talking about the Andrew J. Brady Icon Music Center, though, why was it so important for you and to really have this be a success, a successful project? Why does Cincinnati need this venue?
Well, let me sort of deal with a couple of things you said. One is, if you think about where the Banks was 20 years ago, where it is now, it's a mud pit.
Absolutely.
Now, I think the best part about it is the park. Stunning, gorgeous.
Always packed on a sunny day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I run down there all the time. It is amazing to pinch yourself and say, I can't believe this is our riverfront. Remember what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So there has been a lot of good things. GE is another thing that you mentioned, very positive. Yeah. I had advocated putting a music venue in place prior to Newport, and I literally predicted that if we didn't move fast enough, that Newport would beat us to the punch. Yeah. Sadly, the county refused to listen, and that delay cost us several years on the music venue. I also believe, as I made clear, that I didn't think it was worth the county spending $30 million on riverfront property for a cement plant just to move it and give the land to the Bengals free of charge. The Bengals certainly can buy it, but I don't know why the taxpayers are buying it. And so I think, candidly, that deal was not handled particularly well. I do think it's cool we're going to get a music venue on our side of the river, and the music venue itself is being paid for 100% by the symphony. What I had proposed was that it could have been built a block later without having to buy the land on the river and giving it to the Bengals, and in my opinion, wasting $30 million. So of county, it wasn't our decision, that was county decision. So I thought that was a series of mistakes, but from day one, I thought getting a music venue that would be populated at night, in addition to Reds and Bengals nights, would add vibrancy to our downtown and to the bank. So the fact that the symphony's paying for it themselves, and they're going to be programming with concerts of various types, I think will still add excitement to the banks.
Just getting that attention, that draw downtown, that activity. All right, more discussion right after the break.
The Watsons After Christmas.
The issues impacting you, all on This Week in Cincinnati on 9 on your side.
And welcome back to This Week in Cincinnati. I'm Craig McKee, again joined by Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley. If we can quickly here, talk about the streetcar divorce. What are we looking at in 2020 with sort of out of the loop, city running things? Are we going to have free rides, and will that make a difference? I think there's a lot of questions that the taxpayers have about where does the streetcar really go moving forward?
Well, as you know, I thought it was a mistake and a big waste of money, so I don't really see that getting a lot better. City Council overturned me on that decision, and it is what it is.
But it is a ball that you have to deal with now. I mean,
yeah.
So.
I mean, we've managed it. We required developers who develop downtown over the Rhine to contribute to the operating costs to reduce the burden on the taxpayers. Having said that, the one good thing about the divorce of the streetcar is that it's totally separate from the Metro bus system. In March 17th, the most important thing, in my opinion, in Cincinnati in 2020 will be this levy that the voters will have a chance to vote on in March to rebuild the West Hills Viaduct. Projects like, we're paying for Columbia Parkway, but the next Columbia Parkway. And other bridges and potholes in our region that are not getting the funding that I believe they deserve out of Washington, D.C. or Columbus. I think Washington, D.C., considering how much money we send to D.C. and to Columbus, should pay for West Hills Viaduct, but they're not going to. And so either we fix it ourselves or it will crumble. So this levy, this sort of levy in March, if it passes, will immediately allow us to rebuild the West Hills Viaduct and other bridge projects around the county. It will also expand bus service. And the reason I bring it up in the context of your question is because in the levy itself and in the language itself, it forbids any of the money to be spent on the streetcar. So this levy, if it passes, will fix the West Hills Viaduct, fix other bridges that come along with problems like Columbia Parkway, which we're paying for, meaning the city right now, and other bridges that need to be fixed later and potholes in the meantime, expand bus service. And if you work in the city of Cincinnati, regardless of where you live, if you work in the city of Cincinnati, maybe you live in Anderson Township and work at Fifth Third, you live in Green Township and work at Kroger, whatever. If you work downtown, you get a tax cut because this countywide sales tax will replace the income tax in the city by 15, it'll go down by 15%. And that is a greater savings to people than the increased sales tax. But that increased sales tax will fix the West Hills Viaduct and expand bus service.
A lot of people always concerned about infrastructure, for sure. Vice Mayor Smitherman has announced, of course, he's not planning to run now for mayor. Is there anyone that pops up on your radar that you would endorse or recommend to run?
I do not intend to endorse, but I also like to remind folks who keep, that I still have 2 years left. And my focus is being the best mayor I can be for, I still have 25% of my term left. So there's still a long way to go. And I have a lot to do that I hope
you know how politics is. You know, everyone starts, I mean, just the fact that I found CranleyForOhio.com already registered, a lot of speculation about the Senate or governorship as well.
I'm not running for anything right now.
All right. Have to ask. Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Thanks from Performance King.
Impacting you, all on This Week in Cincinnati on 9 on your side.
A top Kentucky lawmaker is suggesting creating a pardons commission. This comes after a much criticized flurry of last-minute pardons by former Governor Matt Bevin. Several stirred outrage, in fact, from victims or their families, prosecutors and lawmakers as well. Kentucky Senate President Robert Stivers is predicting lawmakers will try to modify the pardon process. He suggested creating a pardons commission to review cases and make recommendations to the governor. And that is going to do it for This Week in Cincinnati on this Sunday. Be sure to join us for breaking news, weather, and sports at 6 and 11 tonight on 9 on your side. Plus, we're always updating your headlines on WCPO.com. And if you haven't done so already, download our mobile app. You can get those critical push alerts with breaking news, and check us out on your favorite streaming device like Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire Stick.